So a while ago I made a video regarding the Scottish Government and their dismissive attitudes towards granting Christians the same hate crime protections and so on that they had a month earlier granted to Muslims. And it was in the wake of the Sri Lanka church bombings, and at the same time there was news regarding Christian persecution reaching genocidal levels. Now, interesting to note, as of the time of recording this video, the video in question on the Scottish Government's YouTube channel is about the only video that's now deleted out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos going all the way back to like 2013, 2012, etc. That one video is gone. So the little bit that I do have recorded of said video doesn't provide the full context nor the suggestions that were ultimately dismissed in the end. So the woman on screen brought up the fact that Christian persecution levels were reaching genocidal levels, and the question was posed about granting Christians the same protected characteristics, etc, etc. And she even said something along the lines of Scotland was historically a Christian nation. And it was interesting to see the total dismissive attitude from the woman who responds.
The Scottish Government can provide to ensure Christians are protected here in Scotland, and what action it is taking to prevent hatred towards religious groups through better education.
Cabinet Secretary.
Absolutely welcome any efforts to ensure that we continue to provide support to people around the world, but also to build on our vision, which is a modern, inclusive world which respects and realises internationally recognised human rights and protects people who want to practice their faith. And we continue to do that through working with Interfaith Scotland, other faith groups, and certainly after following the Sri Lanka attacks, I wrote to many members of the Christian faith in Scotland to make sure that we stood in solidarity with them.
And that's sadly all I've got of that video. You know, Christchurch comes and goes on the amount of pandering and protections, etc. that were guaranteed and granted to Muslims in comparison to the lack of even empathy that was on display when the tables were turned and it was time to talk about Christians. Anyway, the reason I bring this all up is because yet again the Scottish Government are launching a crackdown on supposed soaring hate crimes. Look who it is, that's the same woman. Community Secretary Aileen Campbell says hate crime has no place in Scotland, and Brexit's apparently being blamed. Is it I? Scotland's community SAR has blasted hate crime after Brexit was blamed for a rise in toxic language. Community Secretary Aileen Campbell says hate crime has no place in Scotland as she lays out a master plan to combat racism, sectarianism and bigotry. Quite simply, there's no place for hate crimes. Recognise the signals we send out as a government are important. Scotland is taking leadership to set the standards and the structures that build the equal and fair society I believe Scotland can be. This is why we will update our hate crime legislation so that it's fit for the 21st century Scotland, and most importantly affords sufficient protection for those that need it. Having clear legislation about hate crime sends a strong message. Oh yes, it does. It makes it clear to victims, to communities and to the wider society that certain criminal behaviour is not acceptable. The National Police Chiefs Council for Operations said the increases seem to coincide with some of the debates in Parliament. Aileen Campbell added, in addition, we have adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism and are also consulting on adopting a definition of Islamophobia. We are also considering what more we can do to protect faith communities and their places of worship. I'm proud that Scotland is an open and inclusive nation, and an ever-growing cucked nation in the process, but we are not immune to hateful behaviour. Why is it whenever the government, or in some cases individual politicians and or activists, have some new proposals in the pipeline to put forth, there always seems to be a rise in corresponding hate crimes and or discrimination relating to the very same thing that the premeditated proposals were supposedly intended to tackle? You know, if it's a publication regarding Islamophobia, all of a sudden there's a rise in Islamophobia. If it's a publication to tackle supposed gender-based violence, all of a sudden there's a spike in sexual assault allegations. I don't know. And this is no different, realistically. But yet, in your attempts to create falsehoods in order to justify premeditated publications, amendments, and legislation, one thing becomes self-evident. Diversity is not a strength. Quite clearly it's not a strength. And even if it ever could be, forcing it upon us and forcing laws through, etc., quite clearly has the opposite effect. You know, how many years now have they been forcing this shit in every aspect of society? For how long now have they been bragging about how diverse and inclusive and open and progressive Scotland is, and yet hate crimes supposedly continue to rise? Inevitability that with the ever-expanding goalposts regarding racism's definition, it would too open the door to more reasons for people to phone the police and report a hate crime. But the fact of the matter is, the further these goalposts extend, and the more watered down the term becomes, the more bogus calls the police are going to end up inundated with. And it talks about the Scottish Government introduced a race equality framework in 2016 to tackle racial discrimination. However, a survey published on Wednesday suggested fewer people from the BAME community believed that anti-discrimination laws were working. The polling company questioned more than 500 members of the BAME community on their experiences since the last survey was conducted, with more than a third of those questions saying they'd experienced discrimination. And of course, define discrimination. You know, again, a word that has a clear-cut definition. Seen the goalpost shift in recent years to mean a hell of a lot more than it once did. Of those, more than a quarter felt it was becoming more frequent. Lead researcher Professor Nazamir said this survey builds on others in previous years and points to a persistent trend of discrimination that black and ethnic minority Scots face. It is encouraging that black and ethnic minority Scots still have faith in the institutions to tackle racism, but this has decreased over time. Right? The instances of discrimination included name-calling, the use of inappropriate language, incidents on public transport, and prejudice in the workplace. Right, okay. Of those who had experienced discrimination at work, 25% said it had happened when applying for a job, saying it had affected their promotion chances, and a further 18% their attempts to seek equal pay. A Scottish Government spokesperson said racism and discrimination have no place in Scotland, and it was continuing to take decisive action, including a campaign with Police Scotland to tackle hate crimes, explicitly targeting racists. The statement added, in addition to the Race Equality Framework, which sets out our long-term goals, our Race Equality Action Plan outlines more than 120 actions were taken over the course of the Parliament to secure better outcomes. Better outcomes! No proof whatsoever that the people that were surveyed are in fact being honest, and even if they believe themselves that they have been the victim of discrimination, there's no way that you could tell that you didn't get a job because of some form of prejudice. It sounds to me as if you didn't get the job and your worldview was reaffirmed. Gender pay gaps, supposed pay gaps and lack of representation clearly indicates a very racist society, must be tackled immediately. There's also too few women and people from ethnic minority communities in senior positions in the legal profession, and of course that needs to change immediately. And how do we do that? Well, we'll just step in and save the day and ensure that these people receive better outcomes. We will work with key stakeholders to understand what further action could be taken to remove or perceived barriers that might be preventing talented legal professionals from reaching senior positions, including applying for judicial office. Okay, no, there is no barriers. So if there was 50 white individuals applying for a job and one guy that's black, the chances of that black individual getting a job are rather small in comparison if you're comparing the 50 white people as one block, which these people do, or the people counting the statistics up do on their behalf anyway. And these people know themselves that that is what it is, but they persistently ignore the reality of the matter. They persistently run with this narrative that it's discrimination and racism. And I know what this is leading to. 50, 60 years from now, when the roles are somewhat reversed or on the verge of becoming reversed, And whites are now a minority in Scotland, and there's a lack of representation for white people within specific sectors in society. Anybody that has the audacity to speak out about such an issue will be swiftly reminded that that's the joys of being a minority. Can see it coming a fucking mile away. So a consultation came out a few months ago on amending Scottish hate crime legislations, and I love this bit down here where it talks about taking account of intersectionality. An individual may have more than one protected characteristic, and that offences may be motivated by hostility towards the combination of an individual's characteristics. Shit, it's just insanity. Talk about separate protected characteristic categories for intersex and transgender individuals, as well as misogyny. Again, nothing to do with misandry. True equality would have misogyny and misandry if you're going to go down that route. But of course we can't have that. Oh no, no, no.